Hello, Facebook world. My name is Chrissie Hodges, and this is like a groundbreaking moment. Just so you know, I'm here with Stuart Ralph from England.
Yeah.
And this is one of the very small amounts of time we're going to be in the same room. So we just thought, oh, what the hell? Let's just do a Facebook Live video, and we're so excited about it. And I'm going to actually interview Stuart, since he interviews everybody else in the world about OCD, and nobody really knows anything about him, and he's this elusive person that always puts everybody else on the highlight. So I want to put him in the hot seat today. So I'm going to let him introduce himself very quickly.
So his name is Stuart Ralph from England. I do the OCD Stories podcast, where each week I interview great people who know a lot about OCD, whether that's therapists, researchers, or now people with OCD. So getting those people with lived experience on the podcast to share what's helped them. Hi to Christie and also Kim. Kimberly interviewed me recently.
Hi, Kim.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so first of all, I just want you to know the banana is here. My hair was blocking it, and it's probably going to continue to block it, but that's okay. If Ethan were here watching right now, he would make fun of my hair. But anyway, first I want to say a few things before we get into talking about Stuart. Number one, what an honor to have you here, not only at the event, but also at my house.
Yep.
It's been a bit surreal, like when you get to hang out with advocates that are really dedicating their lives every single day to advocacy for OCD. You don't often get that opportunity. So we have been lucky because he had to fly in a few days early and after to make the trip worth it, to be able to spend some time together.
Yeah.
And it's been
good.
Amazing. And I feel like Stuart's now a part of my family. And so I'm just feeling really lucky to have him here and wanted to share a lot of the knowledge that I feel like I've taken from him with you. And so we're going to do 3 topics today.
Yep.
And the first one is goals. And what I have noticed about Stuart is he's goal oriented, but not in the way of like goal, like you better do this or else, but more of just having that focus gives purpose, gives meaning, gives looking at the day of I'm going to accomplish something. But that's my take, and I would rather him talk about what does it mean about setting goals to you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks for that. So, goals traditionally, I was always trying to be a high achiever, and goals for me would be about being successful and achieving things. And now goals are more about what do I want to do with my life? What's going to give me meaning? Dare I say, what's going to make me happy? But the reason, another key thing for goals in recovery is it's not just about overcoming OCD, because sometimes that may not be motivating enough when you're doing exposure and you have to face your fear. Right. So the question to ask yourselves is, if I can beat OCD, or when I beat OCD, what will I be doing? Who would I be? What will I be experiencing? How will I act? And find something that motivates you, whether that's, I'll be able to see my friends more, I'll be able to get in a relationship, maybe I'll be able to have a child, I'll be able to go for that job I always wanted, I won't be stuck in my head so much, so I'll be able to be fully focused when I'm playing the Super Nintendo. Whatever it is.
Which we're probably going to do later.
Yeah. So, the question is, the magic wand question is, if I had a magic wand and I could wave it, and get rid of OCD, what would be different about you? And that's sometimes a good starting point to figure out who you want to be, what you want to be doing in the goals. And Chrissie needs to start talking in an English accent.
It would be ugly, gross, and you would stop tuning in.
She's tried. It was terrible.
Oh, sad! So has Sean David.
Yeah.
Gonna watch this and die. Anyway, go ahead.
So
goals.
So just figure out what's motivating to you, and always keep that in mind whenever you do treatment, and also just generally day to day. You can live your goals and dreams now, most of them at least, with OCD, with anxiety, because they're just thoughts, they're just feelings, and you can take them along for the ride. As simple as that may sound, it is possible because many people do it.
Excellent. The next question is the one that I am the most excited about, and you may not know this, but I was glad you brought it up.
Okay.
And I'm drawing a blank, and the reason why is because Stuart is actually here in Denver because we did this huge event that's going to be on video for you in a couple days. But this past weekend, we spent time with 8 OCD advocates, and Stuart was one of them. And we presented to people here in Denver about lived experience and how we got into advocacy and all of this. And so that's why he's here, number one. Number two, you can purchase the video for the price of a ticket, which is $35. That will come available here in a couple days. But things have been so chaotic the last few days. And I feel like you and I are those people that we're not going to be like, so the weather in Denver is like this. Where are we going next? It's more like meeting, and then all of a sudden it's... So I want to know, like, the depth of how you feel about life. You know? And those are the people that I connect with, and so I feel lucky. And suffering is something, human suffering, which ironically, I'm so not promoting, but I'm just telling you, like, my podcast at Coffee at Chrissie at Buzzsprout this week deals with this topic, which is changing your lens when you live with a mental illness and it's suffering. And we have had a conversation in the last few days, and I can't remember when or how or why, but it was about suffering. And I think you quoted somebody.
Thich Nhat Hanh.
Yes! So yes, it was probably a big deal when you quoted it, and I just couldn't remember because all of this shit is crowding my brain. And right now, like, I'm trying to relax today and then tomorrow, but before then, I have all this information. But one of the things that I liked the most was our views on suffering. And you're going to clear it up with a quote, but for me, I was not able to connect to humanity until I understood what suffering was for myself. So this is not I'm so glad I have OCD and mental illness. This was I feel the benefit of what I went through because of suffering. And then Stuart is going to talk a little bit about why I feel that way. And he embodied when he was talking about the quote and everything, and being able to put it in a way more eloquent way than I usually do. But that we are so lucky, we forget, because the symptoms can be so horrible and the stigma can be so horrible. We forget we're also presented with a way of life that we can live because we understand what suffering is. So with that, I'm glad that we brought up this topic, and I'm going to turn it over to him to talk a little bit more about the quote and what I'm talking about and make a little bit more sense out of my jumble.
Yeah, a couple of quick shout outs. So Margaret Sisson is now listening. She was one of the game changers.
Yes, Margaret!
Margaret Sisson is behind Riley's Wish, which is a charity which looks at OCD and addiction. So I encourage you to go check out that. And Sean Sinek is another game changer who's listening.
Sean!
Draw Your Monster.
And by the way, Sean, you said, you just throw your people aside and you put the Draw Your Monster right there. And well, you know what? It was accessible right here, and we were able to give it to you. He will understand. Many people won't, but he will. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay, so suffering. Firstly, let me tell a joke. So it's around marriage. In marriage, there are 3 types of rings: the engagement ring, the wedding ring, and the suffer ring. No, terrible joke. Okay, and hopefully my wife's not watching. So,
thank goodness Sean David isn't here in the background going,
you'd like that joke.
He actually would.
Okay, so before I get in the quote that you're referring to, something else worth mentioning around suffering, and it's more of a book recommendation. It's called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, who was a psychiatrist, but he was I didn't laugh about the point I'm about to say. He was in a concentration camp. I laughed because I saw something else in the comments.
Sage, we're talking about you.
Yeah. So that book is all about converting suffering into meaning. So he basically said, when you find meaning in suffering, it can no longer be suffering. He's basically saying when you find meaning, you transform it. And for me, starting the OCD stories was a huge part of that. That it took the focus of myself a lot, and when I was struggling, it allowed me to really focus on others, and that helped me. And I'm not saying you necessarily have to do anything around OCD, but sometimes finding meaning into the things we go through can lighten the load a bit. And I encourage you to check out that book. But the quote you're referring to is by Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Vietnamese monk. And in the talk on Saturday, I said he was a Tibetan monk. So apologies to him and all the Vietnamese and Tibetans. But anyway, he said, when you learn to suffer, you suffer much less. And when I first heard this,
I love it.
I was like, what is he on about? But then when you start to unpack it, what he's saying is, if you allow yourself to suffer in the now, you suffer less in the long term. But with OCD, we don't want to think these thoughts. We don't want to feel the anxiety. So we push the thoughts away. We push the anxiety away. And yes, that brings short-term relief sometimes. But as we know, it just makes OCD stronger and anxiety stronger, and it gets worse. So our inability to suffer in the short term causes suffering in the long term. But when we switch that and learn to suffer in the short term, we suffer less in the long term. And that can be, when you get, it's easier to do it the first time you get a thought as opposed to if you've been spiraling for a few hours. But when you get the thought or the initial feeling is just allowing myself to, Stuart, just feel it. Don't fight it. Just allow it to be there. Don't judge it. Accept it. Allow yourself to feel the anxiety, to feel terrible with it. But if you do that and sit with it long enough, that anxiety goes. But as soon as we react to it, as soon as we judge it, that's effectively a compulsion, and we've started the OCD cycle because we haven't allowed ourselves to feel, to suffer. And it's a skill. It's not something you're going to get straight away, but it's something over a year, if you keep practicing it, you will notice yourself getting very good at it. And it doesn't have to be around OCD, it can be around everything in life. Someone says something that hurts you, feel it, allow it to hurt you a bit, and then kind of move on because you can let it go. But quite often we put up walls, we don't allow ourselves to feel that emotion, and then we never really deal with it, and then it comes up in more twisted ways later on. Yeah.
I'm going to go a bit deeper here. Yeah. So we did not discuss questions before now, but whatever. We'll just talk about them as they come on. But I think the more organic, the better. Mm-hmm. This is such a huge topic, I think, for people that have OCD, the suffering part and the unwillingness, not just with OCD, but the, how can I put this? The resistance. It's almost like turning the magnet the opposite way of not wanting to go toward anything that's going to create anything but happiness. So the question that I want to pose that I'm going to answer first, because I want to give you some time to think about it, is why is it that those of us with OCD resist suffering? You think that's a good question?
Well, we'll find out in a minute with you.
Okay. So the question is, and I'm going to talk a little bit first for only in my lived experience, why is it that people with OCD resist suffering? For me, I resist suffering because I was introduced at an early age to the negativity of fear. And fear, if you allow it to penetrate everything that you are, and especially even as a child at 8 years old, I did not understand that fear was something that I could overcome. You just don't naturally know this. Sometimes you need guidance, sometimes you need insight, but when you have this part of your brain that you have to manually override every single day and go, oh wait, by the way, you're not going to vomit, or you're not going to turn into like Satan's spawn, or you're not going to, turn into a pedophile, or, if you're having this every day and you have to override it and you don't know that you have to override it, you resist it. That's where the magnet turns. And all of a sudden there's this buffer between I suffering and Chrissie. And so all of a sudden I go, well, I'm not going to go toward that. I'm going to avoid it, which obviously is a compulsion. But I learned that as a young person. I learned it through my OCD compulsions, and then I translated that into my life. In everyday suffering, I cannot deal with anger. I cannot deal with sadness. I cannot deal with heartbreak. All these things where all of a sudden, if I'm going to feel bad, the magnet turns, and I'm like, I can't deal with that. I'm going to move the other way, and I'm going to protect myself in whatever way that I can. I think that becomes confusing to us. And I also think it becomes an avenue for us to become victims of, well, I didn't mean to be this way with people I love. I didn't mean to do this. It was my survival. It was my survival. And so, unfortunately, it took me over 2 decades to be able to realize, like, I can forgive the person that I was when I was a teenager and in my 20s and even in my 30s, that this is just how my brain worked. It isn't because yes, I chose it, so I have to own that. Yes, I made decisions that hurt people and hurt myself, and I wasn't making the right decisions, but what the F ever? Like, I was surviving an illness. I was surviving the emotional turmoil. And so moving into the emotional recovery, which, maybe I'll add that question on at the end. Moving into emotional recovery, I was able to say, I have to be able to forgive myself because this was something I couldn't control. So suffering, number one, as my brain developed and as I was a person of adolescence, teenage years into adulthood, I resisted it. But as I got to emotional recovery and then realized suffering is almost freedom, once you just look at suffering in the face and go, if I just push through it, I have way more freedom. It's the same thing as ERP. It feels differently, but in the same ways, I had to learn that I don't have to be afraid of what's on the other side, because for me, all that's on the other side is relief and freedom. And that is expressing all that I'm feeling with the people that I love who can take it, just to be honest, and understanding that I can wake up the next day when I am suffering and look in the mirror and the same person standing there. And she doesn't have to be tainted with what I think those emotions are tainting her with. So, a little philosophical. But.
Yeah, no, I like it. I think resistance for people with OCD, I think it often comes down to what you said, and also OCD thoughts are ego dystonic, to use a geeky word. They're the opposite of what we want. We don't want to feel them, which is why they're so troubling, right? People with paedophile obsessions usually love kids, and obviously because of that, the OCD's latched on and said, what if? People with relationship OCD are often usually romantics. I can speak for that. People with harm OCD, again, in my childhood, I was always a very caring child, but I was always worrying about someone dying, some poor kid in Africa getting hurt, or my family getting hurt, because that mattered to me. So the resistance came because I didn't want that poor kid in Africa to die, and I didn't want my relationship to end. So the resistance comes in because it's a survival mechanism. And until you know that thoughts are just thoughts and not facts, and you can start to see through the OCD cycle, the resistance is always going to be there, I believe. And I think once you realise the thoughts are just thoughts, and there's a baby.
It's not the baby in Africa.
Yeah, it's a sign. So until you learn that suffering's okay, and thoughts are just thoughts, that you can start to let go of the resistance, let go of your grip, become more fluid, and things will just kind of flow through you and flow past you without sticking. And that's obviously the problem with OCD, is it's sticking.
That's true.
Yeah. So maybe learning to suffer is like the loop of the brain.
Well, I think it's just so hard to resist when, and I say this all the time. It's, hi, Neil. Look, Neil's there too. Neil! Hello. Neil was he was the MC for the OCD Game Changers. And I also want to give out a shout to Carrie Bastion. She was on here. She just commented too. Carrie is someone that, thank you for all you did at the event. Thank you so much. But I think that what happens is, and a lot of times when I'm working with clients and peer support, fears are fears and fears are scary. But people who live with OCD and anxiety is fear injected with crack, or cocaine or whatever else. It's amplified 1,000 million times. And so it feels that much worse. And so it's, of course, your first reaction is going to be whatever that reptilian response is, fight, flight, or freeze. And so that's what the first compulsion is. So I don't really know where I was going with that, but I just wanted to say that maybe I really just wanted to say it's not your fault. If you don't know that that's what it is, you're just surviving. And when you're just surviving, sorry, but you don't, a lot of times you don't have a lot to apologize for. And I fully believe that. And yes, we hurt people when we survive, but survival instinct is our most basic. And when you are living with OCD for years and years, undiagnosed, even diagnosed, and just in fucking hell, like, you don't care. You're just trying to just survive day to day. So I just want you to know you're not alone. And I think the greatest ever segue from that would be self-love. So Stuart is such a proponent of self-love, and I think that you even mentioned self-love to me about 5 times maybe this last weekend.
It's annoying, isn't it?
No, it was not annoying.
Okay.
I loved it. I forget to love myself. My natural instinct is to say, I think even when we were doing the video and I was telling you like how I have to set it up on books, I don't have a professional setup, and I think I said I'm an idiot and everybody hates me. Right?
Yeah.
So my natural inclination is to go to non-self-love and
Self-hate.
self-hate, yes. And so, which I think is also a product of growing up with an illness that continually pummels you with thoughts that tells you you're something you're not, which is another subject which Sean Chinook and I will talk about at some point on here. But I want Stuart Ralph to talk about self-love because he really just has a lot of thoughts and a lot of great insight about this.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to caveat it by starting by saying I haven't got this figured out. It's something that I'm talking about a lot at the minute because it's something that I need in my own life, and something that's come up for me in my own therapy sessions is you know, it's taken 2 years to get to, is that I didn't love myself, and I especially didn't love my younger self, and that kid was suffering. So I just wanted to caveat that this isn't me preaching, this is me kind of just sharing what I'm doing in my own world at the minute. The biggest thing I see in mental illness that's missing in every illness, diagnosed or undiagnosed, or any type of suffering, is a lack of self-love. And often when there's self-love, those people may be in pain, but they're not necessarily suffering, if that's kind of clear. Suffering is often, Kim, if she's still listening, talks about the second arrow story on my podcast, about when you get hit by the first arrow, that's pain. But the second arrow is suffering, and that's the labels we put on that pain. So OCD is the pain, and that hurts, and it's terrible. But then when on top of that, then we're like, oh, I'm so stupid, why am I thinking this? Am I a bad person? If she's listening. That's the second arrow, and that is optional. You can't help OCD. You can have therapy, but you couldn't help getting it. But you can help the extra arrow that hits you, the one that, then that's the one that's going to hurt even more, because that's, you know, OCD is trying to hurt you, and whether you realise it or not, if you're not self-loving yourself, you're hurting yourself. And for me, if self-love was in abundant and people could practice it, because I don't expect them to suddenly get it, but if they could practice it, I think suicide would drop dramatically.
Absolutely.
I think suffering would decrease. I think recovery rates would improve, because if you're compassionate to yourself and you love yourself, you're going to work harder. You're not going to be as hard on yourself when you don't get the results you get week to week. And there's a few exercises. So, you know, one that I picked up from somewhere else, I don't know who did it because I was listening to a podcast, but she said, just look yourself in the mirror in the eyes. And I find this, especially being a man, I find this very hard to do. And I just say, I love you, I really love you, and I accept you as you are. So that has that self-acceptance piece as well, and giving yourself that unconditional love. And the first time, a couple of times I did it, I'm like cringing and it's horrible and I almost want to die inside. But after a while, it becomes normal, and you stop judging yourself even then, and you can. I'm not saying I start to love myself, but I start to remove those negative thoughts a bit more and start to nurture a more compassionate tone in my own head. Another one is, so I mentioned there about not liking my younger self because I thought he was a victim, and he was, but now I see that it's okay that he was a victim. Before I hated it that he was a victim, and I have a picture of myself.
Yay.
There he is. Bloody adorable, right? And he's even got "Here Comes Trouble" on his
blonde
t-shirt.
in there.
Yeah, I am
like
blonde.
a little towhead.
It's weird. All the boys in my family are blondes, and then I lose my hair, but some of them go brunette. So that's another one, learning to see that. And when I see that picture of me as like a 3-4-year-old, it makes me smile. And it's little things like that. And it can, there's a million ways to love yourself. It could be take yourself out for dinner, take yourself to the cinema. You could take someone with you if you want. Go for a walk, spend some time by yourself, or even with them, but just do things that nurture your soul, that show you that you are worthy of love and you matter. And I think a lot of people in this world constantly look to others to love them. And yes, we need that. We need love from other people, but ultimately we need to learn to love ourselves first. And I think in society, when we, at least in my country and in my area in my country, when you start, and my family, you start to love yourself, it almost can come across as arrogant. Even if you would say, I'm really proud of what I did. Growing up, not saying my parents, but other people be like, well, that's a bit big-headed, is an expression we use in England. I don't know if you use that here.
We do.
Yeah, so like big ego.
We always have to confirm whether or not the UK and America use the same term.
I mean, I know America are a bit behind us, so I have to check. I'm joking. So there goes most of my audience. So yeah, just learn to love yourself. Stop relying on others and realize you're your savior. And therapy can be expensive, but self-love is free. And as cheesy as that sounds, if you can get self-love, you're a huge part of the way there. Because if OCD is being addicted to you, you don't need to be addicted to yourself. And I hope that came across right.
I love that he just said kind of a curse word on the video here, because he never curses on the OCD stories. So you see the self-love that you're giving yourself to express yourself correctly without boundaries. Yeah.
Well, I did on stage, didn't I?
That's true. He dropped an F-bomb on stage that you will see on the video when I post it in a few days.
Dropped about 20, but
it was glorious. Self-love. My thoughts on self-love are, once I learned, did you see that? It almost fell. Okay. My thoughts on self-love are, and I actually described this to you earlier, is that I got to a couple of different points in my life where I hit the end of the road and I had to make a turn, and it was a hard right or left, and it was just a decision that instead of trusting my gut, because a lot of times we have a hard time with OCD, trusting our gut, instead of it, I continue to hang on, hoping for the best, and then the universe punches me in the gut and goes, by the way, you're going to learn this lesson, whether you want to or not, and I'm going to continue to make it harder. And so I get to the end of the rope, and I'm like, okay, then I need to make a decision, and self-love was one of those decisions. I hit a stop sign, and there was no more road to go. I either learned to love myself or learned to commit to being miserable with who I was, who I had been. And it was not an easy choice, because the familiar, as we all know with OCD, is so much easier. Why choose recovery? Why choose getting better when you can get comfortable in misery? I've been there. I still am there sometimes. Why do ERP? And I know it will get better when it feels awful, but it's familiar to be anxious. Yep. Why should tomorrow I wake up and start ERP? Because what if it doesn't work? These are all things that are familiar, but sometimes you have to get to the end of the road and go, I can either choose to stay in this or I can choose something different. Yeah. And with self-love, I made that choice. Yeah. And it really was this, I'm going to stare in the mirror and say, I love you. I had I'm going to write on a piece of paper every day for the next 6 months, something good about me, even if it's, I make good chicken, which by the way is on the stove back there. We're going to eat this after we're done. And he will decide whether it's good, but I don't care anyway, because I wrote that on the paper, and that means I self-love for my chicken. But anyway, even if it's that, I would write something, even if it was the worst day of my life, and I woke up and I hated myself in the mirror and I hated everything about me. I would write something good, like my shoes are cute, whatever, it doesn't matter. I would write that, and I learned that maybe I have this huge thing in the air about what you should be if you self-love, but I have this arsenal down here of a foundation of all these good things about me that I thought I was good at. Mm-hmm. One being my hair, which a lot of people don't think is good, but I don't care, Ethan. But little things that you build off of, and once you convince yourself, then you start to convince others. Yeah. Right? I mean, if you can convince you, and not in a non-authentic way, but like, I truly believe these things about myself, then others will see that in you, about you, because they mirror you. If you feel that way about you, they're going to feel that way about you. And I'm going to tell you also, I lost a lot of people in my life when I went through that phase. And it was a necessary extraction, whatever. It was necessary because I had designed my life in order to prop up the things that I didn't love about myself. And then when I started loving myself, the right people, including this person, including many people, came into my life who were willing to see that authentic side. At least I hope you do. Yeah. Okay. Look, I just asked for reassurance and he gave it to me on camera.
You tricked me. What was if I was lying to you?
I mean, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. I mean, well.
That's okay.
Anyway, the point is that I think that you and I have very similar paths to self-love, and I took the route of writing something down every day. Stuart took the route of looking at himself and being able to convince himself, whatever you need to do, it's worth it.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, because these things we're saying seem very simplistic, and I know some people can be skeptical, like, that's not going to work, that sounds rubbish. But when you look at ERP is such a simple form of therapy. It's literally the act of facing your fears, spiking your anxiety, and refraining from doing a compulsion. It doesn't get any simpler than that in its core form. But yet it's so effective, which to me shows the brain is unbelievably intelligent and unbelievably stupid, because it can easily be tricked and retrained. And that's what ERP is doing. It's retraining it. So simple things like looking in the mirror, like meditating on self-compassion, on writing things down about yourself. As simple as they seem, the brain's going to fall for it if you do it long enough.
So, I mean, basically, what loop do you want to be stuck in?
Yeah.
What's the loop that you're stuck in? And how do you change? How do you infiltrate that loop and start a new conversation? That was brilliant, wasn't it?
Yeah. We'll let them decide.
Okay, well, maybe not lastly, because maybe it'll get a little deep, which is okay too. Stuart, I'm huge on the phases of recovery. Yeah. And the biggest phase for me was the emotional recovery. Okay. So I can talk a little bit and then give you some.
Yeah, you go, yeah.
So emotional recovery for me is, there was the symptom management and the symptom recovery, which I went to therapy for. And then there was the aftermath. I have a mental illness now. Mm-hmm. This is who I am. This is how I look at myself. This is how others look at me. I'm terrified about what the world thinks about me, how to look at the world through the lens of someone who has mental illness. Do you identify with that?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, I'll keep talking then.
Yeah.
So for me, there were two phases, and if you follow my advocacy, you know that I talk about this a lot. There's the physical recovery, which was symptoms, of course, and then there's the aftermath of dealing with everything that OCD left in its path of destruction. For me, it was symptom management. Symptom management, that's it. That's all that's going to happen, and then we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. But not knowing that it went through like the Tasmanian devil, stirring up everything. And when all the dust settled, I was left with all this wreckage. And I had to end up picking up the pieces. And for me, I'm an avoider. That's my compulsion. That's the way I survived, and that's the way I look at the world. It took me a long time. I didn't want to feel. That's the cat that just came in here, by the way. Sorry. If you hear a meow, that's him. But that to me was the emotional recovery. Picking up all of the pieces after the symptom management happened. And that to me is just as important and so under addressed, because we all think, I'm going to say this again because I said it at the event. We all think when the symptoms are done, the red carpet's going to roll out to life. Here we are, symptoms are managed, black and white thinking, here we are, it's all awesome, everything's going to be great. That is not how it is for many, many, many of us, because the wreckage that we leave behind, the relationships that don't work out, our self-esteem, our self-worth, how we look at ourselves, how we look at how we plant our feet in the world now as someone with mental illness. That I feel like is equally as important in the journey. And so just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a good take. And I agree. OCD is just one part of some people's human experience. And, you know, there's sometimes comorbidities, be it depression, schizophrenia, bipolar, eating disorders, whatever. And that's the very mental illness side. But then there's other things, like there's trauma, there's tough experiences, there's people you've lost. And sometimes they could be very separate, and sometimes they could be very intertwined. And sometimes therapy after ERP, for a couple of years for me, you know, I've been talking about things from my past that were so intertwined with OCD, and sometimes they were so very separate, but it was all happening at the same time. So I've had to untangle it. And the biggest thing for me, as I said earlier, I say to my therapist, and this is something I haven't really told many people, is from the age of let's say it's 16 and younger, when I look back at that time in my life, it's grey. And when I look from 16 onwards, it's colour, if I think in memory. And that was fascinating. And I said to her recently, when I look back now before the age of 16, it's the colours starting to spread into those years. It's not all colour yet, but you know, it's taken time through kind of traditional type talk in therapy to unpack, you know, the result of all these things that were happening, including OCD. And the biggest thing for me was just a learning to feel emotion, because I never allowed myself. Whenever I felt like I was going to cry, I shut it down, and I still do that. I mean, this weekend was a perfect example. I mean, I got close to crying about 100 times, but I couldn't.
I didn't, just so you know. Yeah, I cried majority of the weekend.
Oh, yeah.
Majority.
But yeah, you know, growth is a part of life. And, you know, I'm probably always going to be improving and growing and healing. And that's okay. Dare I say, enjoy it now. You know, when I have breakthroughs and when I manage to see things differently, it feels really good. I've accepted that pain and that suffering, and now I don't want to say like a butterfly, I'm trying to find that light from it, and that becomes special. Instead of being sad about, okay, well, there was this dark part, it's the dark part has allowed this nicer part. And if it wasn't for everything that went on, I wouldn't be sitting here having a good time with you. I wouldn't have been at that conference. I wouldn't be hopefully helping you guys. And I'd never change anything for that, even if it means there's dark times ahead. It's my experience.
So that question, by the way, was not on our post-it notes. And I really wanted it to be more authentic in your experience. Why? Because, you know, to wrap up, living with OCD or mental illness in general, it doesn't matter what the mental illness is so complex. It's not just you have this illness and you're done and you get therapy and that's it. It's a growth experience for, this is what you've been hearing, by the way. His purr. It is like a motor. He was ruffling papers down here too, so you probably heard that, and I'm all like, let me try to remember. Anyway, it is a growth experience beyond just the symptoms. And I wanted both of our takes on that in a more authentic way, because we want you to know, and I can say we confidently, but like, I want you to know that you aren't alone, and that if you are struggling in symptoms, in the middle of symptoms, after symptoms, it is a continual growth period. And Stu and I have both gone through it all and continue to go through it. It's not even like there was like a stop sign and we were like, yay, we're here. No, we're still walking down that path. The great thing now is that we've got platforms like this and we can all do it together. Allison Dotson.
Yes.
Allison Dotson! Yay, another game changer. Hello, thank you for being here.
Good job, Rudy.
I know. Oh, and Rudy! Rudy, hello! Yay! So anyway, final thoughts before we wrap up?
Just love yourself. It's that simple. You deserve it. So act like it.
That's it?
Yeah.
No more?
You want more?
Maybe one more thing.
Okay, one more thing. Try meditation. I believe it's an under talked about resource for mental health generally. It can be very hard if your mind's very stormy, but maybe try it on days you're a bit calmer. Do guided meditations, learn the basic skills, and I believe with consistency you'll see improvements.
I just have to say my friend Allison wanted me to do an S. I just hit my head, sorry. So shout out to you, Allison. I whistle sometimes when I talk.
You sound like Herbert the Pervert from Family Guy.
I think you might have triggered people.
Good.
Anyway, that is it from us. I think we're done.
Yeah.
What do you think? Well, we're
Yeah,
starving.
good.
We've got salad and chicken ready. I think we've got Super Mario Brothers, maybe a little movie. The Bachelor is still recording, and I don't... He said he would watch it, but I think he's only being nice. So, Anyway, we are so excited to be here together. This has been an awesome weekend, but also I feel like what an honor to be on camera with you and to be able to talk to you about your experience, because you put so many people on a platform, but you are equally as important.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed it. We will be posting the OCD Game Changers video here in the next couple days. Ethan is editing it and getting it all ready for us, so stay tuned. I'll probably go on a little video too and put up how to do it. Yeah. I'll read out how to do it or whatever. You will not be disappointed. It was amazing, wasn't it?
It was very good.
8 advocates got up and Neil and myself emceed it, and it was
heartfelt.
It was from the raw.
Touching.
It was from the heart. So thank you again. I am so glad to be here. And Bridget, hi Bridget. Thank you for being here. And we won't see you again together.
Well, not for a while.
Not for a while. Like, especially in the same room together. Maybe in July.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do it in July. But thank you for being here. We'll see you later. Have a wonderful night. Enjoy The Bachelor if you're watching it. I know it's supposed to be the best drama ever. Bye.
Bye.